Hi, everybody. It's Achilles Justice of the Philosophy Society. It's February 27th, 2024. We're at the Toronto Metropolitan University Student Learning Center, same room as last time. No, I don't know what I'm talking about today. I'm going to figure that out in about a minute, unless anybody has any starting points they want me to go with.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about common sense?
Common sense.
It's not that common. Clear that.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Common sense. So the philosopher that I've read that has something to say about this, he is a Scottish philosopher from the 17th century, 18th century, around that area. His name is Thomas Reid. And common sense is basically, in his understanding, what a person of like normal cognitive capacity would come to as a conclusion, right? And so you could almost just say you have a standard distribution, right? And the majority of people that fall in this category, what their judgment would be common sense. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it would be common sense. Common is the sensible thing amongst the common people, right? And so like, yeah, like poor judgment would be the lack of common sense, right? So this does not equal poor judgment. Which in some ways, common sense is another way of saying wisdom, I guess you could say. Wisdom in the capacity of like sound judgment. But at the same time, as we've discussed before,
Wisdom's not the same as knowledge, right?
no,
It's gonna be knowledge as well. Or like just being, what's the word? Just an eye. Ignorant.
yeah, like, well, knowledge can be part of common sense. Like the knowledge that if you stay underwater for an extended period of time, you're going to drown, right?
Yeah.
That we would say is common sense, which is based on knowledge, right? So knowledge is like facts, right? And then there's like also procedures or how to do something, like making chicken. And then there's the fact of what is chicken. Being able to identify chicken from beef or from pigeon is a different thing than knowing how to cook chicken. But they're both different forms of knowledge. One is procedural, one is semantic in some ways, right? And so in the general category of common sense, there's certain things that happen over time on this planet that we get experience with, and it becomes our base facts that we have as human beings. Like if you hold your breath long enough, you're going to pass out, for example. And you just don't do that. Maybe you practice when you're a kid, you're like, what happens if I do this? And then you try it, and you get a little light, and you're like, well, that was a bad idea.
Don't you increase our capacity for holding it, but doing that?
Yeah, sure. But I'm just saying the point is that we need oxygen to survive.
Yes.
Right? And that would be part of common sense. And so you could say common sense in another way is just like basic knowledge. That is relatively empirical. Right? There may be some like common sense of like basic arithmetic, and that can be a priori.
Is common sense also geographical?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Well, you can have, again, you can have experience with a certain area, right? But if someone has never, if like someone was like in Plato's allegory of the cave, grew up in a cave and never saw a picture of the earth, you couldn't expect them to know what the continents are. The reason that we know those things is relevant to our experience that you were taught in high school, or you just looked at maps often, you know, or the news or something. And so being exposed to like so the media will influence us in what our general common sense would be, you know, like that the prime minister is like the leader of Canada that's elected, and in the United States, it's a president.
Mhm.
and the current president is Joe Biden, and the current prime minister is Justin Trudeau. You could say that's common sense, right? And so common sense in a lot of ways is going to be based on what you're exposed to empirically, right? So someone like, and it has to do with the ambiguity of the word common. What is common?
Something similar.
Yeah, common as in like the common people. So it depends on what you mean by the group. If you're in like a physics department and you're used to this means the common right here instead of just the general population, then for that group, amongst those people in that meeting or certain managers of a company or a corporation or a kitchen, they may say that common sense is this, right? Where are the spices? So in this environment, it's common sense to know where they are because people there are so exposed to it. But if you're from a different environment or a different social group, it may not be common.
Remember last week you mentioned that like if you get a PhD in something, you're like not really part of common society or something. Who said that?
I don't know specifically. It's about the ivory tower.
The ivory tower, yes. So
Yeah.
you can technically apply that here too, to like have uncommon sense based on your trade and whatnot, which is
Yeah.
common sense within the trade, but not common sense
Yes.
too.
Mm.
Being an expert in your field, yeah.
So it's relative, common sense in a way. If you're
Well,
really
Thomas Reid would talk about it in the sense of, he has a book called The Intellectual Powers of Man. And it's basically what the cognitive faculties of human beings are, and common sense would be related to those common faculties, like our capacity to make judgments, for example, right? Or just basic sense perception. And yeah, but in the way that we use common sense in a contemporary form, it's relative to your experience and in some ways your social group, right? What most people in that group would know, what we would consider common sense. Why do you ask?
Mhm. So that's mean my common sense may be different than yours then. If we belong to different social groups,
Yeah, it could for
Or-
sure.
nations or something like that.
It depends on how people use the phrase. That's a Wittgensteinian approach, right? How we use a term is how we determine its meaning. But we can have kind of an objective understanding of what we mean by that when we just base it on human faculties that are almost universal amongst everybody and what those human faculties would be, right? Like another way you could talk about it is like somebody's like we can talk about this phenomenon like we talk about IQ, like they're how intelligent the person is, right? And there's different ways that psychologists will measure IQ, you know?
IQ tests.
Yeah, and the purpose of this factor would be to determine how much common sense they have. And if common sense is like right in the center, the more over here it would be like expert sense. And then like below that would be like nonsense in some ways, you know? Like it's not, when it goes this way, it's like, and this is sense, and this would be like expertise. You know, most people are sensible. There's few experts, and there's some people that are just nonsensical. They don't really make sense when they say or do things, right? And so, you know, someone who is high in IQ would be on this end, you know what I mean? So for IQ, the center is 100 plus or minus 15. That's like average intelligence. And then for you to be in superior intelligence, it would be above 115. And then below, when you get like below 70, you're dysfunctional. You know, you can't really like survive on your own, really. You need like help, right? And so, and even the way that IQ is measured is, I didn't know I was talking about IQ today, is based in like some of the criticisms of IQ is how people are tested for it has cultural relative questions to it, right? So if you have to like do matching or something like that, or if you have to pick out details within an image, the more exposed you are to the figures within that image, the more likely you'll be able to pick out information from it. And those figures, excuse me, are relevant to your cultural background. right? So people of a different culture can score a lower IQ just because they just not exposed to that information at all or frequently. But they actually don't have a lower IQ. Like their intelligence is just a measurement that's being used to test them, is a problem. And so psychologists,
Is that like saying someone being book smart versus someone being street smart, for example? 'Cause like having knowledge of things and then being able to solve like or notice patterns and complex problems is
Yes.
like street smart. I like lack of a better word to differentiate the two.
well, they talk about crystallized and fluid intelligence. So crystallized is something that is what you're kind of talking about, the street smart in some ways. It is embedded neurologically within you, at a certain age, and there's not really much you can do about it. And then fluid intelligence can kind of like change slightly, relative to like skills and like awareness of stuff. And so, yeah. So that's like, this goes within the realm of wisdom in the sense that how we make our judgments. Right? So when we defined wisdom last time as the capacity for sound judgment, part of that comes down to like perceptual judgment, where an individual is, judging distance, for example, or color, that's like for vision.
Like the senses.
Yeah. But then there can also be like, like tactile, olfactory, just smell.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So when you're on survival mode,
Okay.
when your like mind is used to being in an unsafe environment, whether it's like, I don't know, whatever, like what are some examples? Like hostile environments, an unsafe environment, like an abusive environment. Once your mind is accustomed to that, it gets stuck in survival mode, from my understanding.
Mhm.
And then, so the longer you stay in survival mode, wouldn't that technically make you more perceptual in the long run? Like if you're always on survival mode, you're always listening, always seeing, always like quote unquote being on edge, wouldn't that kind of level up your senses as well? Like it takes a toll on you stress wise.
Yeah, but
Well.
being under stress like that so long, it's not good for you
Mm.
as a person. Like humans aren't really meant to be consistently in fight or flight mode. It's a lot of cortisol that your brain's producing.
Mm.
And, you can't get into the flow state where you're most effective at solving problems and you feel good about the challenge that is being presented to you.
Mm.
And your performance is very good.
So once you get out of survival mode, that's when you can like reap the benefits of what you were working on or like what you were forced to do.
yeah, you don't want to be stuck in survival mode.
No, by all
Like
means,
if fight or flight
Oh.
is how you define survival mode, like in that state, that's not really good for you. Like the human body and brain hasn't really been evolved to be in that state for long. Like humans, when they get engaged in that state, it's to like, that's why they talk about the fight or flight. It's to run away from or freeze,
Mm.
It's to deal with environmental danger and stress. And our culture can be very high because of a lot of factors, and it can be debilitating over time depending on how you perceive it.
Mm.
Right? Like if you look at it in an empowering sense, like if you feel stress and you perceive it in an empowering way, it can be good for you and you can build resilience.
Mhm.
But if you look at it in a debilitating way,
Mm.
it can be very bad for you.
So it depends on your perception then.
A big part of it, yeah. Kelly McGonigal talks about stress.
If it's a very short period, it's considered as a training
Hmm.
for you to get better at things. But it has to be like short period. Same like with a cold plunge, for example.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're just going for a minute or so, you get your cortisol, and that's it. And then you just train to be more, I don't know, resistant to cold.
Through consistency, I guess, not intensity. Is the best word.
So, I don't know.
I was like, I stumbled upon Zersitzung, which is like German for decomposition or disruption. And it was a psychological warfare technique used by the Ministry of State Security to repress political opponents in East Germany during the 70s and 80s. Through
Okay.
abuse of control, psychological manipulation, and whatnot. So these people that were victims of that, they were in this constant state of survival mode, fight or flight, because like they're being followed, they're being harassed, they're being like quote unquote torn apart. Like a lot of times you see that with celebrities or with paparazzi when I leave them alone and like won't give them the sound.
It depends on how you, like, how the environment, so again, we have our person, right? And then there's the environment. And how this person with their mind, how they perceive the environment.
Mhm.
So the environment can have an, like, in some ways, there's only so much you can do in your perceptual cognitive structuring to deal with what's coming in. Alternatively, you may need to move yourself to a new environment.
Mm.
Right? That might just be the thing. If you're in an existing environment where you're consistently being stressed out or people are not treating you in a healthy way, like an unhealthy workplace, there may be nothing you can do within that place. And the feelings you're getting from that, it's not to suppress those feelings, it's to remove yourself from the thing that's causing the feeling.
So the key point is perception. So you can view it as something negative.
So one is how we perceive, and then two is action, what you're doing. Because there might be nothing, you may be perceiving it accurately and the emotions you're getting from it are real.
Mhm.
They're not distorted in any way.
Can you fool your brain into believing
Wow.
something better?
Yeah, you can be delusional.
It's not healthy, right?
No, that's not good.
Like you're doing a chore, you hate doing it. Like, I love this chore.
Like to a certain degree, you can frame it in such a way that like, this might be unpleasant, but I understand why it's good.
Mm.
Right? And the immediate unpleasantness of it is not the thing that brings value to it.
So if you try and look for the positives, which is always a positive and negative, if you train your brain to see that, then you can change your perception on it and say, this is good for me for this and this reason, for this and this reason, regardless of the list that's on the negative side.
Yeah, like for example, I may not like doing laundry, or I might be really tired in the moment,
Mhm.
right? But I understand it's just good to do it, and I just don't fixate my attention on the negative element of doing the laundry, even though I acknowledge that I might not like doing it, or the dishes for that matter. And I don't attribute value to how it feels, but instead to the reward and the consequence of just getting it done. And then that way, I change the information I'm getting from it, like the reward is in its completion, not in the doing. So that's what I mean by perception. I don't mean like being delusional. I mean like just orienting your attention differently, like focusing on the results of having it complete. Like when my bathroom was a little messy recently, and then we cleaned it, and the feeling of having the bathroom clean was really, really good. Doing it and like having a bunch of bleach and stuff, that was uncomfortable and didn't feel good. But I didn't focus on that. Excuse me. Right?
Mhm.
And so just thinking about it now, when I visualize or remember the reward of the clean bathroom, that is motivating to me to want to do it.
Makes sense.
That's different than like somebody, like some other person being negative to you, giving, I don't know, giving you negative emotions or whatever.
Mhm.
And this relationship, because they're part of your environment, it's like the social environment. There can be like physical environment, like you're cold,
Mhm.
or like things are messy, right? But then there can be people and how people interact with you.
Overly criticizing, let's say.
Criticism is a good thing,
That's true.
right? If it's,
Constructive criticism.
yeah, if it's meant to make things better,
Mm.
right? Like don't write on that side of the paper because it's glossy, flip it over and you'll be more effective writing on this side. That's a form of criticism,
Mhm.
right? But if the person is, it depends on why they're giving you that information, and then also the nature of the effect. Like if the effect is not constructive in any way, then we can consider it malicious in some ways, like, or if their intention is to cause harm.
To cause you to have like a negative reaction, you feel sad, angry,
Yeah.
less self-esteem. So would that be like negative criticism?
Well,
Bullying?
it's not constructive. The intention is not to help you improve.
Hmm.
If it's to put you down, then that's not a good thing. Right.
How do you deal with that?
Well, that's where boundaries come in. That's where saying, if this person cannot exercise self-control and stop from doing that. So one thing is you can like communicate to them. So make them aware that what they're doing is hurtful. And if they're unable to do it, then you just create enough distance between you and them that they can't do it anymore. Right? That's you moving over to a different environment. Or limiting the amount of time you spend with them because of the nature of that relationship.
What if it's like online? That's like, so I know a lot of kids struggle with online bullying in high school and whatnot.
Yeah, you just need to block those people.
Mhm.
You know, don't allow it to continue. And then recognize that some people are malicious
Yeah.
and report them.
It actually reminds me, whatever you just said, by Marcus Aurelius,
Okay.
where it says, "Today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, aggressive, treacherous, malicious, unsocial. None will affect me of their wrong. I cannot be harmed by any of them."
It's good.
That's
That's stoicism.
yeah, that was a very powerful quote. I just
Good.
linked to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, in the form of sound judgment. So part of our sound judgment is perceptual, and then we can also have like judgment within reasoning. And that's where we like focus on logic and then critical thinking. We can look at like, you know, which is also evaluating evidence, right? And then we can have like social judgment, which is like how to communicate, you know, boundaries. We just talked about that. Who are your friends? And what a good friend is. And then when you see signs of somebody that's not being friendly in a good way, how to deal with that, going through the communication, right? Like that's part of a sound judgment as well.
The second one say behaviors.
Boundaries.
Sorry. So for those who, let's say the people that are like math and physics people and English isn't their strong way of communicating, like how can you improve your communication on like the expression of your feelings? And say if the negative event has happened, and instead of getting angry, calling the person names, how can you work on that communication to express yourself effectively?
Well, there's the emotion that you're experiencing,
Yeah.
right? And then there's the circumstance that has created that emotion in you.
Because I have a hard time expressing myself to the full understanding of my internal state.
Yeah, so that's like you have to be aware of yourself. And sometimes becoming upset is the avenue that we do that with. And there's consequences for that, like getting angry or frustrated or whatever. But we have that part of our brain for a reason in some ways. It's to protect us, to help us with a situation or circumstance that's not good for us. Like if it's a compromising your health, right?
Or an essay, like what writing essays helps that, a form of communication, or like conceptualizing thoughts and arguments.
Journaling,
Journaling too.
right? Like just writing your thoughts down,
True.
right?
For that.
And that's useful for you to understand yourself. So on the website, I have a chapter called the Reflective Mind Map. And that's to be aware of the contents of your mind so that you understand them better. And then you can take some action based on what's going on with you, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking into that.
Mhm.
Reflective mind map.
So also within judgment is like decisions. And so for decisions, we have like cost and benefit. We can be like impulsive or like methodical. You can base your decisions on your emotions or feelings,
Is that like acting on impulse? Kind of.
and then reason.
Hmm.
Well, impulse or being methodical, like planning something out
Hmm.
and thinking about it or premeditating something. And so when we talk about sound judgment, we would also say that this person, their decision, the thing that they chose to do was a judgment they made, and that was a good judgment. We can also make decisions based on our social group, what we perceive the group will approve of, right? And we do it to maintain cohesiveness with the group. That can be a thing. Yeah, and then like within decisions, there's also like just like our basic like life choices. You know? Which is, you know, like your career, education, etc. There's other things going on with that too. Friends, and then also for the social stuff like your intimate partners. That's important. So, yeah, there's more to this, but this is just what I'm throwing down right now. I'm just thinking about what else. Yeah, and I guess like within an intellectual judgment too. I guess that also goes in the form of reasoning. Yeah, they would just be in reasoning. Like if you're an expert in a field and you're making a judgment within that field, you'd be reasoning based on a specific subject. So it's like being an expert again. Yeah. So like if you're a physician, you're a doctor, and you're making a judgment on a specific patient, right? You'd be reasoning also with experience too. Like, yeah, I guess that's like its own thing. Which would lead us back to the common sense topic, right? Like if you had a lot of experience with a certain area, it would be sensible based on what you've been exposed to that this is the right thing to do, right? Anybody that had that same experience would have made the same judgment. But again, when you define common as just the common piece, like the common people, like common based on population, then like human cognitive capacity, it's a little different. It depends on what it is that you're defining common as. Thomas Reed's more going like cognitive capacity, the way he's defining. So yeah, so judgment is important, and it's when we make judgments / decisions, because a judgment in social psychology is like an attribution. It's like we're explaining why a behavior occurred the way it did. And so I think these are cognitive judgments.
So cognitive judgment is an attribution.
Yeah, like why someone did something. We're attributing an explanation to it. And there's a bunch of problems that occur with that because of our limited perspective, right? So we may explain a behavior in a certain way, but we can be incorrect because we don't have all the information to us. And that's why we apply a scientific method to things. But humans kind of have a natural tendency to perceive situations in a certain way.
I guess a good way for like self-reflection is like, why did I do that? And find out the reason why you did it, and then learn from it and say, next time I'll do this instead.
Yeah, well,
Instead of like being
reflecting is important for sure. And reflecting is like part of my experiential, like knowing when to reflect is a judgment, right? Like judgments are almost like forms of decisions. It's like you're determining if something is something or if it's time to do something, right? You're judging it's like a form of identification. Like this is that, this is a marker. I'm making a judgment of this thing, right? This person was angry because of that reason, or this person has this psychological trait, you know? And so to have the wherewithal and when to reflect and think about what we're doing, and then from that, like there's different kinds of judgment, and there's a layering process to the judgments we make, right? So when I'm reflecting, I can judge what is the thing to modify in my environment or my behavior, or what to say to the person, right? And then like mindfulness. Having the good judgment to be mindful in a moment is good for us. And yeah,
Which is like practicing meditation.
that's one way, yeah. Generally speaking, like mindfulness meditation is kind of a thing. And yeah, like how we deal with our attachments to things within mindfulness, like not becoming attached.
To like material things or like also,
Just ideas or emotions. So it's like when we are upset, not being overwhelmed, but identifying this is something that makes me upset. Like recently I was dealing with a situation in the house, and there was something that for a while has been making me upset, and I had to be mindful of how upset it made me and then wait to deal with it for a few weeks. And then recently it was time to finally do something about it. But it was definitely depreciating my cognitive capacity because it was making me upset. I didn't have the mind to be able to think about other things. But because of my responsibilities to manage the situation, it just wasn't the right time to deal with it. And so I would have to just do other things, like go outside, instead of being able to just be assertive and deal with the situation immediately, because that's usually what I do. And it is a good thing to do that, but sometimes it just might not be, like in negotiation, right? If you have like two parties, so there's like party A and party B. If party A wants like, I don't know, 1 or wants the square and party B wants the triangle, and you know they're not compatible, if you go into the negotiation, you're just going to get to a win-lose situation. You can't, it's not going to work. And so it might be better to wait to negotiate until you're able to give up whatever it is you know you're not going to get. And that's kind of what I had to do, right? And then the first opportunity that I had to deal with it, then I did it. Even though I know I have to suffer some consequence and loss, I was not able to accept that loss until very recently. Because I know the other person's not going to negotiate, they're not going to negotiate fairly with me.
just, you say accept.
Accept the loss. I need the square, I'm not going to get it, right? And so that loss of the square, I have to wait. It could be money. There's a lot of different things it could be. I may have to wait until it works, until I can, if it's money, until I can afford to withhold that loss.
So define acceptance. Is it like acknowledging the situation and then not having emotional attachment to that situation?
Yeah, I think this is a good transition topic. So acceptance would be like,
Before we go there, I had one previous
Okay.
question,
Yep.
the mindfulness. We said to be mindful of the attachments. Like we were saying,
yeah,
like
sure.
what are the attachments? So how do you unattach yourself after to the attachments that you realize you have?
Well, that's the acceptance part,
Okay, so we're going to there.
Yeah.
Okay.
right? So in acceptance, it's like, it has to do with what exists. And part of it is our expectations, right? And the human brain tries to simplify its experience by almost like creating this pattern in our minds that's repeated forever. And that pattern of the future is an expectation. It just keeps on going. And so, right, it's like a future pattern. And so when this pattern changes, there is a reorientation of what to expect.
What was the first one you
What exists?
wrote?
That's the first thing, right? And we know what exists through observation. And then our observations get transferred into memory. And then that, and in our memory, that's where whatever it is to be accepted has to be in our memory because it has to exist first,
Mhm.
right? So for example, in like grief and loss, right? There is a transition that this thing that you took for granted that existed does not exist anymore. And so the transferring from what was to what is the process of like, of grieving, really. It's really like there's a change in our environment. So if we have the person and there's the triangle in their environment, some entity, right? And then there's a transition. Person. And there is no triangle there. It's becoming familiar with this. So there's certain properties that are going to make you less familiar with it, right? One would be your emotional attachment. Two would be like time or how familiar it is. Because we become, there's something called the familiarity effect. And what that is the more exposed you are to a thing, the more you end up liking that thing.
Damn.
Just you being exposed to it. So us being in this room, this is like the third or fourth time we've been in here. If you come in this room and then you measure how you feel, how comfortable are you? And then you went into another room and measured how you feel, right? That you've never been in before, you're more likely to measure that you're more comfortable in this room. Specifically this room.
Mhm.
And for other rooms on the floor.
That could be a good thing and a bad thing there.
Yeah,
It's like you can get so used to a situation that's like negative or counterintuitive
exactly.
to your existence, so you just end up like accepting and like liking the abuse.
Sure. Let's just say familiar at the
So
least.
something could turn you into a masochist. But I thought people were like that from birth, like it's a genetic thing.
I don't know about that.
Sadism,
Maybe,
genetic.
I don't know. That's a different topic entirely. Like,
Yeah. So I'm jumping.
it's okay. Like there's going to be a whole orientation related to that person developing meaning off of suffering in some ways. Right?
What's that thing called? The familiarity effect, you said?
Yeah. So when we're transitioning from an environment or something in our environment that we're used to, or it can even be a part of your body, like as we age, our body changes, right? And then we're going to have to adjust to how things are different. And that's like in Buddhism, they talk about impermanence. The impermanence is that things always change, basically, right? And so the practice of mindfulness and non-attachment is to not allow ourselves to get upset when things change.
It sounds easy, or it sounds like
Sounds
nonsense for the
easy, yeah.
moment.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that's unchanging is the consciousness that you are always conscious. And so you kind of find yourself within that and you just kind of exist within it and then watch everything else change around you.
Mhm.
That's where the safety, I guess, lies in that like worldview. Part of it is like when we're being mindful, like in this transition, you can be mindful of like the emotions that have changed because of the absence of the thing, whether it's a person, like my dog eventually will pass away. And I have a lot of attachment to this dog. And that's part of the relationship with the dog. But I know whenever I'm being attached to her and she smiles and stuff, and I'm like, I love this dog, part of me is also like, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to have to deal with this. This is a looming thing you have to deal with. And so one of the ways I'm going to deal with that is the same way I did with my cat. Is within a month, I got a new cat. And so Sophia, my dog, I love her. I may get another dog before then, so my new dog can have a relationship with the old dog, and some of the old dog will become part of the new dog, and they're learning, right? And same with the cat, but it's having at least something there. Like you can have a yellow triangle, or I could have a blue one, or I can like later on have like a black one,
Mhm.
and then you could have like no triangle, right? So like the third option is just there's just nothing there. And if you could switch from this to nothing, that's different than switching from this to a different type
Mhm.
or kind.
I see the two avenues. One is less painful, less strenuous.
Yeah,
But-
because, mhm.
It's also, I don't want to say it's the weaker avenue, instead of like sitting with the grief and like letting yourself heal from it naturally, which will take a very long time compared to the other one. But when you like get out of that, you'll be a lot stronger, I believe.
Yeah, but I look at it this way, it's like me getting my cat
Mhm.
satisfied certain needs. And the first cat passing away or dying doesn't mean that those needs are not necessary.
Mm.
And so I'm actually hurting myself by not replacing the way I'm getting those needs met with a new cat. Because of some external circumstance, like, animals die. That has nothing to do with my needs of love. That's never gonna die. Why should I have to learn to not love stuff or not need love? I can just get it from a different area.
Hmm.
So if you're dating somebody
Possible.
and then things don't work out, just trying to teach yourself to not need somebody is actually misplaced in some ways. Humans are social animals and love is something that we need.
I didn't mean in that sense, like for the relationships, and let's say you have a long-term relationship, you break up, get divorced, whatever. What a lot of people do is they find the rebounds to fulfill that need. I believe it's kind of like a distraction from the feeling of grief of losing that partner. So would you say rebounding is healthier?
It's not about rebounding per se. Like there's a period of grief
Hmm.
where you're accepting that the blue triangle is gone, but there's no need to have no triangle. It's not required. You can just get a different one.
Yeah, but then you have to go through the grief again. And some people just don't want to do that.
So
Yeah, but the grief isn't that bad actually, because it's like there's the placeholder. Like, do I need to grieve the whole thing, or do I just need to switch from one to the other?
I don't know, for some people, it's just too painful to get another pet and know that this one will pass away too eventually.
Yeah, so this is a perspective thing.
Yeah.
I look at it in the sense that my cat Xanadu and my dog Sophia, I'm giving them personally the best life they could ever have. And if you've ever seen me attend to these animals, recently somebody's like, I can't believe you put so much effort into her. Sophia. Yeah. He's like, you really take care of her, like a lot. He's like, I couldn't do that or something like that. Or why do you do it so much? I think it was, why do you put so much effort into her? I'm like, because that's what's required. For her to be happy, that this is what it takes. It is made, I have to become a better person to do what is necessary for this being. And knowing that I have grown as a person to meet the required needs of this being. Like she wants to go for a walk right now. She's a little upset. So there's some things, right? And she wish she was here. She would just be, I don't know what she'd be doing. She'd be here though, right?
circles.
Yeah, okay.
She would be making noises and it would disrupt the thing, whatever. But she would be happy if she was here, right? So we can discuss what it means to meet the animal's needs, but relatively speaking, she has a pretty good life, right? And me giving her that is what I focus my attention on, not holding on to something that I know will change. Where's the impermanence thing? Here. I don't expect her to be there forever. That goes back to the expectation thing. I know that at some point there's going to be a change in existence. But for the duration that she's here, that's my responsibility. My responsibility is not to hold on to her forever. It's that while she's with me, I give her the best. That's my duty to the canine species.
Mhm.
And then when she has had her time in this cosmos, she would want, if she had the capacity to know, she would want me to continue. She doesn't want to die. Like when my first cat passed away, there's this thing I had with him where I would hold on to his tail. And he was holding on to me until the very end. He didn't want to die. And it scarred me for a long time. Like it was very difficult to process that. And so that means, and Xanadu, the current cat, he's the only reason he's alive is because of me. He's 14. Doesn't really look 14,
Doesn't at all.
right?
Looks like a baby. He's
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a little belly. He's like, he just chills out and stuff. He's my friend. I've known him for a long time, since the first Philosophy Society. And it's not up to him or me, really, when his body can't go on any longer. But the being of the cat appreciates what I do for him. And so he would want, if he had that capacity, he would say, yes, continue, do it to another cat, give another cat the same life, because I would keep on going with you. And so to stop is not good. You just got to trade it. And there's going to be a little bit of time here, but it doesn't need to be that long, really. Because your grieving process is going to be much better with a little puppy, for example. When I got the kitten that was Xanadu, it was easier for me to let go of whatever happened with Boozy, my first cat. And yeah,
Yeah.
and so the hard thing is like, well, what when your parents die? Then what do? Do you just get a new parent? Actually, yeah, kind of. Right? Or if you never had parents that were good, you find people in life that meet the same properties. So a triangle has certain properties. All sides are equal. All the internal angles equal of 180 degrees, right? All sides are connected. And your parents, or ideal parents that we've evolved to have, that a person that gives you that nurturing will make you into a good person. You'll have your needs met socially or whatever. Those properties, whatever those are, if your existing parents can't give them to you, you don't just only live with those people. Like, they're not an isolated being. Humans, our success is that you can switch to someone else in the tribe. That's where we evolved, was in small tribes. So if like the mother or father died, somebody else would have taken care of the baby, right? And so it's a little bit different, but I think that it's the most constructive way. You go out and you meet people. And so for me, my relationship with my parents isn't the best. They don't have the capacity to give me the kind of fatherly, motherly role that would be good for me. And so I have found different people in life that do that for me. And I'm a happier, better person. It's not to accept that it just doesn't exist. That in some ways is delusional. That would mean that you never liked the cat in the first place. Or maybe that you were gay and you were with a girl and you're like, this is just terrible. I can't believe that I'm with a woman. Like, maybe that's the case and you shouldn't be with women, right? But then you just be with a man. You know, or you're so antisocial or asocial, you're like, I hate it when this person calls me. I just don't want to be in a relationship. That's different than breaking up because you're not compatible. Sorry,
Yeah, we said the reason why you do that to the cat is because you like the cat. I believe it's love.
Sorry, love you.
Loving is
You're right, yes.
deeper. So like when we are used to loving something for such a long time, whether it's a cat, dog, human, and that gets removed, you're stuck with like no love in a way. Like, I'm kind of confused. Like when that gets taken away, like
Exactly.
where does that love go? Like what is?
So there's the means to an end, right? The end is love. The means can be different things, and there's different types and kinds. So there's like pets, there's people, you know, there's like activities. And you do these things through this medium to get to this. And so to think that you don't need this is the mistake. It's that you just need to switch out the means with a different means. So when Sophia passes or dies, I will have a different dog. Having a dog in my life for the rest of my life, I'll always have a dog because it makes me a better person. Because I can't treat a human being like that. When I do that to my girlfriend, they're like, stop treating me like you're Sophia.
Belly rub.
Yeah, well,
I don't know. It's super special.
Man's best friend
I have different,
okay.
of love.
no, perspective, I guess.
Perspective.
Perspective, yeah.
What's your perspective?
I don't know. I think you can convert yourself to Sophia, to someone else,
Yourself.
Okay.
like a kid.
It would be different though. Like kids and dogs are different. You know?
I don't know. I think sometimes people spend too much love for animals rather than human beings because it's easy.
Yeah.
It's not right in my perspective.
Some people can't have kids
Yeah, but that's different. Let's talk about that. You can,
Yeah, then do it.
and you
Sure.
will.
Sure, that's a good thing. You know, but like, let's say even that you have a kid and when your kid dies. And then you're too old, you can't have kids anymore. And you
Yeah,
don't,
but
you don't
you
need
can-
to,
You can adopt the same way.
yeah, it would still be that transition thing. And there's different, remember I said there's different types. There's people, pets, there's activities, there's the self, you know? And I'm not saying to exclusively only have this. Or when you have this, it cancels out the people part. I'm not saying
Okay,
that.
yeah, it could be parallel, yeah.
Because then the having the dog, if I have it, when I have a child, they will have a relationship together. And then I will have a relationship with both of them. Right? It'll change slightly, but it'll just be a different orientation of attention and time and effort. Because I will now can use the existence of the dog to teach the kid responsibility. We're going to do this together. And I'm going to go slow with you because you're still a kid, but I'm going to teach you how to clean the cat food. I don't want to, neither do I. Smell it. Does it smell good? No. Okay, what are we going to do about it? I don't know. Well, I'm going to tell you what to do. We take it out. I don't want to do that. Well, neither do I. Well, how bad does it smell? It smells really bad. So what are we going to do? I guess we have to take it out. Yes. Do you want to? No, neither do I. Do we have to? Yes. Okay. Then we do it. Boom. Done. Right? Socratically go through and you teach the kid how to be a responsible person. And pets is a very good way to do that. Right?
Sure.
It's best for you to learn to take care of the pet first and master that.
And then
Right.
level up to the kid.
And then teach the child how to do it. But if you're still getting if you're dealing with the stress of developing the habit of having pets yourself, and then you have to deal with the kid, that's a lot of months. I think it's better to do one thing at a time, master this skill, and then add new skills to it. It's easier for you.
I agree.
So in grieving and loss, when it comes to people, right, it's a little different. We have to identify the attributes of this person, right? So like, for example, in intimate relationships, you know, so there's so one is like sex. There's some sexual connection with this person. Okay. Two is, it's fun. We like each other. We have fun together and we do things. There's activities that we do. Three, there might be like
Growth.
comfort. Four is growth. These are just examples of things. Right? Fun / their personality. Just being around them is good. You know? If you don't have sexual attraction, then it's just a friendship. Right? This is friendship. All of it is like an intimate relationship. Okay? So it's important to have some inclining to be sexually attracted to this person. That's kind of necessary in that type of relationship. And so if the relationship is over, you can reflect, right? It's good judgment to know, to reflect from this experience that maybe there's something I did or I can improve on to increase the quality of the relationship. That's one thing. But at the same time, it can just be simple as compatibility. Me and this person were compatible for some reason, right? And some other person that has these attributes, right, will yield a different result.
So what if you're with someone, you know someone, and they have a very distorted perception of reality due to childhood trauma, whatnot? How do you fix their perception of what love is? Because sometimes like love is all they know, like maybe it's like screaming or like, you know, like the very opposite of what love's supposed to be. And if that's all they're used to, how do you like rewire them into like,
Well, I
love
think,
properly? That's like deep.
first of all, that's
like
psychotherapy,
That's psychotherapy.
right?
Yeah. That's
And-
expensive.
It's not even that it's expensive, it's that like you being in that close relationship with them as their partner, like it's, you can grow together, like the growth property you identified. That's good. That's a healthy relationship. But that is assuming that the other person is willing to grow with you. If they're not, right? Like when someone's a narcissist or being narcissistic and they're like, I don't care what you have to say, and they're being arrogant and kind of an asshole. It's like, well, I can't say anything to them. They don't want to, they actively are not listening to me. And so they may need some help in the way they think and process with things. Like we've lived with somebody that looked at the world in a really weird way. And we questioned a lot of their attitudes and the decisions they made. And if you ever tried to talk about it, they would just walk out of the room. They would stop talking and walk out of the room. So you may take it upon yourself as a responsibility to help somebody with their mind, but if they're not open to that feedback, there's nothing you can really do. It's just easier for you to find someone who is open to growth. And the kind of person that's open to growth will be psychologically in a way better position because they've just spent 10 years doing all that work on their own. It's not your responsibility to do that.
Let's say you really love someone. Like,
Sure.
is there anything you can do? Like from a how do you pronounce it?
Psychotherapeutic. Well, again,
Therapeutic way, 'cause, like, we're not psychotherapists. Like, is there a risk of like doing more damage than good?
I don't know. I think it's really important. If you're being malicious,
No,
that's going to cause damage, right? If you're talking about somebody's trauma, right? Like, and you get into a fight or something like that, like worst case scenario, if you need to take them somewhere like CAMH or call 911, it's better that you're there. And evidence shows that just having a friend that's willing to talk to you with you about stuff is basically equivalent to all forms of psychotherapy. Just that social relationship of being able to talk about stuff. Right? Because where does it come from? It's not some magic spell that only psychotherapists have. It's embedded in the way we were evolved, and we were evolved in small groups. So the answers are there, right? That's why I do the community housing program, because I know that that environment is challenging me. Now, there are specific cases like psychopaths, people that suffer from narcissism, right? Psychosis, those addictions that we're going to require an advanced social group, like a therapeutic community, right? And that's where we're headed with the Philosophy Society as a way to implement this and integrate it into a functional framework. But your responsibility is number one are to yourself, to love yourself. And you being a role model, you being successful in your life and giving this person when they're ready a little bit of your time, that's a big deal. If you recognize it, like if you have to go in and intervene and say, hey, you're making mistakes, this is a problem. Again, a lot of people are just not going to listen to you.
that's not fair.
There's a whole variety of reasons why they may not listen to you.
Respect.
There's a whole bunch of things, right? You can try
Authority.
No authority.
authority, there's a bunch of things.
Yes.
You can try, but even if you're correct, like I just recently gave feedback to someone who was teaching a course at the university. They dismissed me. I tried again to give feedback and be more clear and then prove that I have legitimate feedback, and it made them even more upset. Right? And so now what am I going to do? Right? So people, the way that they perceive feedback and criticism, it affects their self-esteem. And instead of learning to accept it and be objective about it, they will get into defense mechanisms and fight back and reframe information. And that's part of the problem with narcissism in some ways, right? And the authority point, Achilles is not an authority because you don't have a PhD or something like that. Well, it has no bearing on the argument or evidence I'm bringing to the table. Maybe it's unlikely that people without PhDs can't do that, but we're all in the same soup. This is the same reality, right? A homeless person can make a very valid point. Maybe it's rare, but it's the capacity that they can see it, right? Genetic fallacy or ad hominem attacks. The origin of where a criticism comes from has no bearing on the merit of the criticism. That's a genetic fallacy.
Don't mind that. Can you say that again? The
Origin of the criticism, where it comes from or how we found it, has no bearing on the legitimacy of the claim. When we're evaluating an argument, how do we do that? What is critical thinking? The evaluation of opinions, claims, beliefs, evidence in ourselves and others. Right? What I'm thinking real and true? Is with this other person's belief real or true? And what's the process for going through that? That's thinking one step at a time and checking the integrity of each part of the thought. Right? And so the way we perceive ourselves and how we feel can affect our capacity for critical thinking and our social position. It makes me look bad when a student criticizes me, for example. But if you dismiss the criticism in the way you perceive, then you're just going to keep on making those mistakes. Right?
So origin of criticism does not reflect.
The origin of a claim, wherever we discovered a thing, has no bearing on the merit of the thing itself. Right? If I find a $100 bill in the toilet, it doesn't reduce the value of the $100 bill. It's just kind of a gross place to find it.
$100.
Most people would take it.
Yeah.
Right? I can't think of one person that would. Maybe a really rich person. Yeah, I'm too good for that.
Thank God in Canada we have plastic ones.
I know.
They're not the paper ones like in the States.
That's true. So, okay. So we talked about the grief thing, right? And part of the transferring from one state to the other, I'm still answering your question about acceptance, is that acceptance is from state 1 to state 2. And there's a switch. And so I have to observe state 2. I have to pay attention to it. Like the marker is in my hand. The marker is not in my hand anymore. If I like hold it in the same position and I like use my brain to hallucinate the gap and I really try to remember what it feels like and I really try to like, I get into like psychosis. I'm like, it's still in my hand. I am creating data based on memory that's not on observation, right? You can visualize or pretend something is there when it's not. It's not as rich and robust as a real perception, but people confuse themselves and get themselves into weird positions psychologically, right? So what I need to do is recognize it's not there anymore. I can't feel the substance in my hand and I can look, oh, it's on the table. That's state 2.
So what's stage 1 and stage 2? Stage 1 is
Stage 1 is this, stage 2 is this,
Ah.
right? Stage 1 is this, triangle. Stage 2 is this, black triangle. Pussy, Xanadu. Right? And so the switch, there's going to be a bunch of grieving, usually a bunch of negative emotions. But there could be changes that are good. I have no money, I have money. Right, I got paid today. Well, this is great. Right? And then you spend all the money on poker games and the sex trade and alcohol, and then you don't have money for food. I know somebody like this. And it's not you. And then you get upset. You were really, really happy, and then you did a bunch of stuff, which we could consider poor judgment, sound judgment versus poor judgment.
We already have it.
Oh, is it there? Where is it?
Yeah, the common sense.
Over here. Okay, so yeah. Sound judgment or poor judgment, right? And now you have negative emotions, and your stress is increased, right? So to accept something, it's necessary that I observe it and I remember that it is now different. And how I frame that, there's going to be a perceptual element and a cognitive element. What I say to myself about this thing, and we can be distorted. We can catastrophize. I'm never going to find another person like this again. This sex will never be as good, or whatever. Right? That's not true. It's not true. There are a lot of people in the world, and they're not the sex champion. They don't have the trophy. They're like, look at, or like 1 billion views on Pornhub. It's like, okay, maybe. And even then, is it that good? Do you want your sex partner to be the Pornhub champion? But there's some serious sex champions that are not on Pornhub. There's probably more sex champions that nobody knows about. And they're monogamous. And they're just surfing that wave with their partner, and it's great. Right? And that's a beautiful thing.
lucky woman.
And men. And so, yeah. And then our expectations. The expectation is relevant to what we remember. It was this way in the past, and therefore I project it will be this way in the future. Right? And the switch, I expect Buzzy to be there. Or for example, this person lived in the house and they had this little dog, and the dog would make this barking noise whenever someone came to the door. And I had like a hallucination this last week of that dog barking when someone came to the back door. But it was just a memory because it happens so frequently, right? Of the dog barking 10, 15 times a day. How many times a day you're barking now? None to like 3. That's it. But the max is 3, really. But sometimes it's not. That's amazing compared to like 20 to 50 times or whatever the hell it was before, right? And so the expectation is built on the memory. So my mind, there was the stimulus, someone was at the door, and then it was like a little mini hallucination. I heard the dog barking, but I know the dog's not there. So I was like, that was just an intrusive memory, like a flashback almost. That will fade over time. And that's where they talk about the time is the best healer or whatever, right? Is that when you have a stimulus, your brain is encoding that stimulus, like blue marker, blue marker, blue marker. You know what I mean? If I keep on doing that, my brain is like recording the shape, the motion, it's recording the color, the light. But if I did this like all day for like 6 hours, and then I took it away, there would be like this weird thing, right? Like the after image, when you look at the light and then you close your eyes and then you look away, you can like see it still. That same phenomena is very similar to what people experience in the grieving and loss process, that they've been exposed to this person, they hold them, they're with them, or they do stuff together, whatever it is, and then you take it away. And now you're in this state. The thing is not there anymore, right? And so some instances, you will have to do this as a transition to the nothingness, but in other instances, you can just switch out the type. It doesn't make sense. It's almost like you're being masochistic to or sadistic to yourself to say that you don't need love or a partner just because you lost the other one. Like, what are you teaching yourself by having nothing? Is it necessary? I don't know if it's necessary. It might be necessary just to find a different way to meet your needs. That's like saying, when I go upstairs and I turn the tap on and no water comes out, I say, well, I got to learn to survive without water. It's not the case, man. I just
all or nothing thinking.
Exactly. I need to go somewhere else and get water so that in the meantime, and then fix this tap because it's just easier for me to get to. And water is the next basic need that I need.
What's the first?
What was the first?
Yeah.
Well, I need to finish. It's not. I don't remember what the fucking bit. It's not a basic need, but it's like a obligation to me, the people, and the things to finish this talk. But for the first, I guess it's air. I'm just breathing at the moment, you know. Okay.
I'm
So-
so trying to understand the 2 stages, the difference between stage 1 and 2.
Well, the difference
Like,
between
I'm
the stages
accepting.
is they're just the difference in the entity that was there.
It's like having and not having.
That's it.
But would you agree that there is a lot of people would just have no one in replacement just because the loss is so great and they don't want to experience that, or they saying like, well, I'm just gonna chill. I'm not ready for next relationship. Right?
Yeah. Like there is a process in the transition. I'm not saying it's just back to back.
Yeah.
But part of the reason, like what I'm asking is, what is the difference in this loss and this loss? For nothing to just changing the thing. When you go to nothing, the loss is greater. When you change the thing, it's less. So if the person believes they have to have a period of nothing, that's necessarily what they need to do, right? They're actually making it harder for themselves. Or if they just said, whenever something that's good presents itself, I'll take it.
Well, I guess in some cases they wait until somebody else tell them, just get the replacement. And this is what they want to hear.
I don't know, because like I've done in the past too, where like I jumped to a new relationship without being fully healed from the first one. And I took some of the traumas from previous relationships and never healed. Then it was like all up, and then I had a new relationship, and that didn't work out. Then I had like 2 different traumas to heal from because I didn't fully heal from the first one.
Yeah.
Like I didn't give it enough time. They
Sure.
rushed into replacing that entity.
See?
Yeah.
So like, what's the good amount of time? Like once you're okay with yourself.
I don't know.
Well, I think what mistake
There's no
did you make?
standards, I think. It's just,
Yeah, like it depends on the person to some degree, because there's different things that you can work on as yourself. But it's different than like preventing yourself from growing. or taking opportunities that are presenting themselves in your environment. Right? It's like if you lost money on a bet and then you saw $100, it's like, no, I can't have that $100 because I lost money on this bet. It's like, no, man, take the $100 and just learn to use it wisely. You know what I mean? And part of it might be communicating to the new person, I just was through this relationship. And so I'm willing to work with you to go through this because I don't want to lose this opportunity, but I am going through this at the same time. And if this person is good for you, they would be compassionate and empathetic to that. Be like, okay, well, I'm always here for you. We can talk about it. If they're like not mature and they maybe have very high needs, then maybe that's a good screening mechanism to, if it doesn't work out with that second person, and then you understand why. Because if you're in a serious relationship, people are going to die or things are going to be lost. And so you want to be with somebody that you can work through that together. That these external things to the relationship don't really affect the relationship, just makes you stronger. You know? So, yeah. So the acceptance part is based really on observation and the acknowledgement that the other thing isn't there anymore. Right? And so that's part of what you tell yourself too.
So isn't that like, so you just gotta like explain it to yourself, and like once you say that statement to yourself, like, I know this is gonna happen, like, I know she's gonna pass away one day. Like, if that's just saying that phrase is accepting it.
Part of it. You're preparing yourself for
Yeah.
a realistic outcome.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Part of it, yeah.
Mhm.
Like in the way that you think about the world, you want it to be truthful. That's wise. That's a good judgment.
And what you say to yourself.
Yeah, that goes back to like the cognitive, and it's reasonable too, because the way I'm thinking about things, it's based on true statements, not what makes me feel good, which would be emotional reasoning fallacy. Right? And this is we already talked about the delusional part, or this decisions. Delusions up here somewhere. Oh, yeah, there you go. Delusional. You can be delusional. Right? Good.
It takes time though. Like, you can tell yourself the relationship is over. Like one day after,
Yeah.
and like you can accept it, but like you still gotta tell yourself that for quite some time after, and like that won't necessarily speed up the healing process. So I guess acceptance is like the first part of the healing process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Uh-huh.
Which is based on
It
your
is.
observations that the environment has changed.
Gotcha.
Right? And not being delusional that they're still with me. It's like, well, you know,
Mhm.
you're just delaying like your own personal growth because you're holding on to something that's not there anymore.
So what comes after acceptance then?
Well, it would like, I would just like to analyze it in the sense that like, in your current moment, are you exhausting emotional energy on this past experience? Like, I have an ex-girlfriend from the fall time. I am currently expending and a girl I dated in the winter, no negative emotional energy. The girl in the winter, I feel like 1%, 1 to 3%. Girl from the fall, 0. In the fall, though, it was like 90%. A lot of negative emotions I was experiencing. Right? And so when you're able to experience the memory without feeling any negativity from it, then you're kind of over it. And you feel, you're like, oh, that happened. Right?
It's basically being fully healed from the scenario.
Yeah.
All people.
But if it's debilitating and it's preventing you from moving on and meeting new people, it's still a problem for you.
So it means you haven't healed yet.
Seeing new people helps in the healing process, because then you don't have this like view of the world where you're isolating them as the only one that exists and now they're gone. When you start putting new information through observing stuff in your brain's like, there's a bunch of stuff here. I may not end up being with those people, but at least I know they exist. And so it's easier for me to accept that this one person didn't work out because there's 10 people I could choose from, or 100. But if only one exists, the value and the loss of that one person is much, much greater. And so that's why going out to like dance parties and stuff like that and interacting with, in my case, women that are attracted to me is good for me. And not with the outcome of I'm going to be with this specific person, but just to be healthy and interact with them, women that there's a potential for a relationship. And then over time, after you increase the frequency of those interactions, one of them will go to the next stage of intimacy, and then you'll see how far that goes. And after you do enough of those, then one of those will go to the next stage, and now you have a girlfriend again, or whatever. But to not do anything, to sit back in the state of nothingness, that's not healthy.
What do you define nothingness? Just like. the
Telling
lack-
myself that I'm like not allowed to see new people because I'm not ready for it. Well, who are you to say that? If you're busy, that's one thing, but it's the perspective on the world,
Mm.
right? Because we can make judgments of ourselves that are not accurate. And so the best way to do that is to test it out. Like in Burns' pleasure predicting sheet, right? When Burns says, you may think about how good this will be, and then your prediction is completely inaccurate to when you actually do the thing. And so that's why it's always good to just go out there and test it and be like I was dancing with this girl on the weekend and I was so uncomfortable. I was really uncomfortable. Her and her 3 friends were there and they wanted me to get in there and dance with their clothes, but I just wasn't comfortable with it. I was very uncomfortable, but I stood there as long as I could. And then I escaped. I was like, yeah, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And she was super beautiful. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out still. Because I'm not comfortable just grabbing girls. It makes me feel weird. I've seen it happen where men will go behind a woman and dance with her. It's just not maybe I'm immature. I just don't feel comfortable with that. I would rather, my solution was to like tap her on the shoulder and say, do you want to dance? I think that's the best way. Because everyone's watching you, like it's like on stage, especially me, because I'm like the dance champion, like people watching me. And it's like, it's a very far fall from the top. It's very far.
I don't want to see you dance.
Thank you.
You don't-
And
I never see it.
You don't want to see him?
I do.
Oh, you do.
anyways, and so I think it's better because we talk about consent is a big deal, right? But sometimes in social interactions, if you always ask for things like, can I kiss you? It makes the situation weird. Talking about the process makes the interaction weird. You just need to be in tune with how the person's feeling and then respond in the moment, right? Or take incremental steps. And if you notice that she moves away, then she doesn't want to fucking touch you. So you just don't do it, right? But in this circumstance, at this point, I just feel more with that interaction, and I've had several others, like 7 other similar encounters. I think it's best for me to tap her on the shoulder and say, would you like to dance? And put my hand out. It might be artificial and I'm going to a different part of the brain, but that's just where I'm at because it makes me feel comfortable and I need to be comfortable, at the right time. And so, what was I talking about this? Just exposing yourself to certain circumstances. It could be applying for a job, same thing, just going out there and doing it and allowing yourself to feel uncomfortable because in that state of being uncomfortable, that's the experience I need to learn from. What is the next step? If I never go there, then I'm never really going to learn, right? And it makes sense that I have some anxiety with relationships, as we all do in some ways, because relationships can be really, really good, but they can also ruin your life or really take it on a
You can say that again 5 times.
right? They can take it into a direction you don't really want to go, right? Like you get the wrong person pregnant, or you get an STI, or who knows what happens.
PTSD.
There's a bunch of things. And so it makes sense that we can become apprehensive, right? We can have the rose-colored glasses and look at things in a really positive way, but be excluding all the risk involved. And as we get older and we have more experience, we've experienced it. We know what kind of goes on in these in relationships. And so, but it's still important to expose yourself and to learn to find someone that's healthy, reflect on what's happened to you in your life, right? And learn to grow and be harmonious in that stuff. So I think that's a good approach. I think that's good. Does that make sense with acceptance? I don't know if I fully answered the acceptance part. Part of it is just being mindful and encoding it into memory. And the narrative, what you tell yourself. That's like a combo
Repeating it to
part of
yourself.
that.
Kind of like, is that what you mean by the memory part?
Well, there's me not looking at the board. And if I don't look at it, I can't encode that data to memory. So part of it is like studying the board. I see what I've written and now it's in my mind, right? And then there's the process of recalling it, I'm not looking at it and I'm visualizing what it looks like. And then I look at it and I visualize. That's how you study, right? there's that part of encoding it into memory, that it is a thing that has occurred. And then there's the narrative part, right? What I tell myself. If you have the automatic thought, like your girlfriend leaves you and you say, oh, she didn't really leave me. She's just like those funny memes. Like he blocked me online, therefore, and then there's girls in an airplane. Therefore, I guess he wants to see me in person, right? Like it's very delusional,
That's, yeah.
right?
Funny.
And that person is not accepting,
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
right?
Is that like chasing the high kind of? Is that what it's called?
As being delusional is what it's called, right? And so that's where our reasoning and critical thinking and being logical is important, right? Which is based on data that is in memory, that we're encoding psychologically. This is something that has occurred. It is real. And so those things together will bring the person to the point of acceptance, that state 2 is now the present state and state 1 is the past. State 1 is not the present anymore. It is now the past.
Mhm.
And so acceptance is, what is the present?
Mhm.
Uzi is dead. I buried him in the forest by Lakehead University. That's what happened. And now I have Xanadu, who has a funny little belly and he has a pink nose. Okay? And there may be a point when Xanadu passes away. And we'll see what happens with Xanadu. I'll bury him maybe in the forest by the thing. Or whatever I do.
So maybe.
Because I'm not sure if I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know how I'm gonna deal with that specifically, but there will be something that I will do. Right?
Bring on the process of.
How I manage that situation.
Remember we talked about that there's like a different stages after like end of the relationship,
Mhm.
and acceptance is one of them. What would the other ones?
Well, there's the Kubler-Ross like stages of grief and loss.
Yeah, yeah.
That's from like the 60s, 70s.
Super.
Kubler-Ross. She did like a study on like people that were dying.
I just found
Kubler-Ross.
Uber.
But it's very old and it's outdated, and there's a new approach now that I'm not prepared to communicate about, but it does exist. The acceptance part is when you're able to discuss the present accurately. That's acceptance. This is what is the now, right? Which has to do with my memory, has to do with the story I tell myself, right? And the emotions that are involved. We don't want to be eliciting negative emotions in such a way. Acceptance also assumes this state of like, I am comfortable with what the present is as well,
Mm.
right?
What if you're comfortable?
So that means you haven't fully accepted subconsciously, maybe consciously or
Would you still have hopes?
Well,
hopes.
okay, I think that's good for today. What do you guys think?
Maybe it's not acceptance.
That's true. You're still hoping like, oh, maybe she talks to me again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's best just to let it go and then look for something else,
Except that
right? You shouldn't have to be the person's psychotherapist. That's not your responsibility.
oh, the person though.
Yeah, well, we can, I don't like, growing together is one thing, being supportive is important, but it's not like not being their psychotherapist. That's a different role, right? Like being an intimate partner that talks about growth and you work through things together is one thing. And you can do that together and that's fine. That's like what a healthy relationship is.
So you should keep that separate then. Let's say you're a psychotherapist and you realize your partner has some problem. Do you keep work and for healing cover the picture, or do you send from a therapist?
I think it's good for them to have their own therapist, but if you have the skills of helping people, you can also help them. Depends if they want you to help them or not. Like if there's growth and positive outcomes to be had, then it's a good thing. But if they're resistant and they're not comfortable, then that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Makes sense.
All right.
Huh.